The medical information included in this podcast is provided as an educational resource only. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions.
For the Fabry patients and caregivers, I would say you don't have to worry quite as much as I did. You know, we are all here to support you, and there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of people working on Fabry. We got this. We're going to accomplish a cure for Fabry. I feel it. We are there for you.
Today's conversation is a special one for me. I'm sitting down today with the Vice President of the CFA. This is someone who has been involved since the very beginning and has never stopped showing up for patients. She is someone I have always seen as strong, grounded, and sometimes relentless. She is a fighter in every sense of the word. Not just in what she's done publicly for Fabry and the community, but in the way she's lived her life every single day. Her story is one of love, resilience, loss, and courage. This person is my mom, Donna Strauss. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Julia. Happy to do this.
Okay, so today, Mom, we're talking about your journey and what it looked like to walk alongside Dad and, through Fabry, and what it meant to carry the role as a wife and mother and a caregiver, and how all these experiences have shaped your life and the person that you are today. So let's start with the early life, before Fabry had a name. Can you just take us back to when you first met Dad? You were 12 years old, right?
I was 12 years old. And then when you look back, that's 58 years ago that I met your dad.
Wow.
And yeah, I met him. I was very young. And when I was in grade 8, I remember my grade 8 teacher telling me, you should not have a boy with a car picking you up at school. You're too young. However, your dad was pretty persistent. And he said, when he met me, he said, I'm going to marry that girl. Yeah, he was kind of awkward guy. He was kind of a geek. I wasn't really interested. But he was pretty persistent, and long story short, we stayed together.
When did you realize something wasn't quite right? When did some of those symptoms show up?
Well, when things got serious between us, he actually invited me on our very first date. And, I was kind of excited about all that. And that day, about a half an hour before he was supposed to come and get me, he phoned and said he was sick. And those events kept happening throughout our dating life. He was sick quite often. And I was like, what the heck's going on with this guy?
Yeah.
He didn't know. However, we did know that his mother passed away when she was quite young, but he didn't know what was going on with him. And it wasn't until I ended up getting a job at our local hospital, and I was talking to my family physician about my boyfriend. And I said he gets sick all the time with his pain. And he also has these red spots like on his stomach area by his belly button. And my family doctor was extremely interested in what John was going through. And he said, I'm going through for a dermatologist. I would like to see your boyfriend if you would bring him in. And I did. And he right away said, I think this is something I just learned about. It's called Fabry disease. And he decided to do a referral and send us to London, Ontario to get an actual diagnosis. And that's when he was diagnosed.
Okay. And I can't remember, was it at that time where you guys were able to kind of piece that together, that was what Grandma Strauss passed away from as well, or?
It wasn't then. It was once we went to London and we met with the doctor in London. He did the family history thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he told us that this is likely what your mother passed away of. And She died in the early 60s. She went into kidney failure. She was 42 years old, leaving behind 5 children. She died of kidney failure because there was no dialysis back in the early 60s.
Yeah.
So that's how we put together that diagnosis. Of course, when you get the diagnosis, you're like, what does this mean? But we carried on throughout our relationship, and we ended up getting married. I got married when I was 18. I turned 19 on my honeymoon. We had many, many years of John getting sick, emergency room visits, mostly for pain. He carried a note back then in his wallet to say when he went into emergency that they were supposed to give him a shot of morphine for pain, because it was before computer days. So the doctors would always grab a book and open it up, and there was a paragraph so tiny on what Fabry disease was, because it was very unknown at the time. So we were really walking in unknown territory, and it was very scary because we didn't know what any of this really meant.
For sure. Well, it's like, I think so many people hearing this who have lived through that time, it's like you had to figure out so much without the information and the support that exists today. Because until I was much older, we didn't know any other Fabry patient at all. We just never talked to any. I remember when Dad had his first conversation with a Fabry patient, and he got off the phone and he told us, and he was so excited because he's like, oh, I got to talk about things that I was going through, and this person is going through them too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that support through meeting other people means so much. And it meant a lot to me too, because I also got to meet there was 3 couples that one of the doctors, once he was diagnosed, we were sent to a Toronto clinic to meet with Dr. Joe Clark, who was absolutely wonderful. And he was very concerned about not just John, but me as well. And in those early days, he brought 3 couples together. And it was just like a relief to meet somebody else going through the same thing that we could relate to. And that was just, that was a really good thing that he did for not just us, but for the other 2 couples as well. So
absolutely. Well, it's always important to make sure that, I think that even at the meetings that we have today, is to include the caregiver and the family in everything, because you are living that life too. You may not be having the symptoms, but you're watching the symptoms, and I think that growing up, I think that we saw Dad, just kind of, as a family, we just had to adapt. I don't think it was a big deal at the time, just because we didn't make it a big deal, but it was like we were on a family trip, and, you and I both love shopping, and we would just have to adapt. Dad, I remember looking, I can see him today sitting on the bench at the mall. I mean, maybe he was just taking the way out too, because
a lot of men do that.
But I remember him just being tired, and we have a picture of him washing the dishes, and he fell asleep on the couch. I think it's just that we just adapted as a family, or if we had to go home early, or if we had to stop what we wanted to do to, do something different. We just did it. And I think that, it was okay. We just did it. We made it work, and we carried on, but we did it, and you were really good at and you still are today, is just adapting. You're just pivoting, and it takes a lot out of you. I think you handle that really well, and you just kind of go with the flow, and you just say, okay, we're doing this now, and that's just what we're doing. We're going to have a good time doing it. But I do often think, especially being in this point in my life with 2 little kids, and I think about you in that stage of life, caregiving. And did you ever just feel like you were losing yourself in all of it? Did you ever feel like, I just imagine how hard that was.
I think after his diagnosis, and then after figuring out what was going on in our lives and trying to put some type of being normal through all of that. I mean, Dad was young. We were young, and we had a son. Lee was 3 years old, and John went into kidney failure. He needed dialysis for 14 months, and that was a really difficult time. I don't know why, but I always remembered this great big truck backing into our driveway, and there must have been 25 boxes of supplies that came out, because he had to do peritoneal dialysis at home 4 times a day, and he was in his 30s. And so all this equipment was coming into the house, and like IV poles and IV bags, and you have to make room for all that. You've got this little kid at home. You're just trying to work full time. And he felt awful. I know he did. But we got through all that. I don't know how I got through all that. I really asked myself where I ever found the energy, but I did. And he went through dialysis. And for 14 months, he did that. And then he was able to have a kidney transplant that was donated to him by his brother, who was actually a pilot with Air Canada. So he had to go through quite a bit to donate his kidney, but John did get a kidney transplant. And actually, after his transplant, he did extremely well. And then along came Julia. So you were born.
And I know at that time, you and Dad were told not to have any more children.
We were. And they actually said, you're pregnant. If it's a female, you should have an amniocentesis. And if it's a girl, you need to have an abortion. And I would have no part of that. And so we carried on. We had a beautiful baby girl. Look at her. Yeah. After John's transplant, he was doing extremely well. He owned a business. He was successful in life. And we went on. I don't think you really remember a lot besides Dad being tired and fatigued, a lot of appointments and that sort of thing. So but he was doing really well post-transplant, and we built a new home. Life was good for us. We were happy. We started to be able to travel, which was something we were never able to do because in the early days, when you are looking after someone, you feel it's normal, I think, to feel some type of resentment because all your friends are traveling, going places and doing things, and you can't because he couldn't get through that. He couldn't get through a weekend of traveling, or let alone a week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so then we fast forward through lots of years, and we're doing good. We're having fun as a family. I know Dad had a TIA when I was in grade 8. But you and Dad watched a movie, and it was called Lorenzo's Oil. Tell us a little bit about that movie and how it kind of changed how it just motivated you guys. And what
So we were just flipping through channels, and we saw this movie that came on, and it just caught our eye because it was actually Lorenzo's Oil is a story about a father who has a child with a rare disease, and he's a scientist, and he just fought to the end to help his child to get a treatment. And after the movie was over, Dad and I were saying, gosh, there's got to be somebody working on treatment for Fabry disease. And so it was the very next day, we got really motivated by watching that show. The very next day, we called Dr. Clark and said, is there anything happening in the Fabry world? And there was trials going on, but because John had a transplant, he didn't qualify to get, it was called enzyme replacement therapy, which we are well aware of now. He didn't qualify, but Dr. Clark had suggested that I call the 2 companies that were making the treatment and ask them to give it to John under compassion grounds. First company shut me down, said no, there's no way. And the second company, the guy, I called him, I think at least 40 times. And he finally answered his phone and listened to my story. And he told me I really tugged on his heartstrings. I'll never forget those words. I was sitting out the back, and when he finally talked to me, I started crying. He said, I'm going to give your husband this treatment under compassion grounds, which meant we didn't have to pay for it because it's very expensive. It's over $200,000 per patient per year. So, at that moment, when you hear those words, this relief comes over you, and it gives you a lot of hope. And that's something that I think we were worried about, but you just feel this sense of finally somebody's going to help John. And so he ended up starting, but of course, as we know now, when you start he would have been about 48 years old, because he was only on treatment for a short time. When you start later in life, that's not great. In today's world, we know that now. But the fact that they did give it to him, it really, really did provide our family with a real sense of hope.
Yeah.
And we were so excited about that.
Yeah. I know that it was, I think you're right about hope. I think it's like when Dad started on therapy, even though it was so much later in life, he just felt the sense of like relief and hope and the days to come. And so did all of us. You know, we all were just like, okay, this is moving forward now. Things are going to get better, is what I feel like what we all thought at the time. Yeah.
Right. Right. And things did get better. We were doing normal things. We were, Dad and I went to Hawaii together. He had fun. I mean, there was always, he was slower than other people. He was tired. I mean, John was a very quiet guy. He kept a lot of his thoughts to himself, unlike me. But yeah, we did basically live a normal life, and he was working every day, and life was good.
Yeah. So on May 10th, you were at a meeting and you were looking at starting an association because, as we talked about before, we didn't know any other Fabry patients. We just met, you had just recently met a few. Dad had made a friend doing enzyme replacement therapy, and that was really cool because I think they got to spend a lot of time together. And so, we started realizing, okay, there's no association for Fabry patients. So you were motivated and you had a meeting that day to set up the CFA.
It was, let me just go back one day. So May 9th was Mother's Day.
Mhm.
We all went out together. It was great. We had a beautiful brunch at a golf course. And then at night, I know Dad went outside to dig a trench because of some water thing happening in the backyard. But May the 10th, yes, I was thinking we should have a group to help support other patients across Canada with Fabry disease. So I met with one of the pharmaceutical companies to figure out what's the need and what do we need to do here. And I had just left that meeting, came to pick you up because you had a job interview, and we got a phone call to say John collapsed at work. My son worked with his father, and he had just finished the firefighting course. And when we got to John's work, the ambulance was there. They were doing CPR on John, and Lee had tried doing CPR on his dad. But the ambulance took him to the hospital, which was very close to where he worked. And we all went and followed. And, the doctor came out. I worked at this hospital. The doctor knew me. The staff knew me. They walked out and said they're sorry. They could not save him. And he passed away on May the 10th, 2004.
Yeah.
Really hard day.
And I think it was at that point that our lives changed forever and everything changed. We often talk about how Fabry impacts the whole family. And like you said, Lee was doing CPR on Dad. You and I were there. And I think those are visions that we'll never get out of our head, and I think it's a story that now that we are doing what we do, we actually hear these stories. And I think that they're so hard, and Fabry really does impact every member of the family. We often say that it's a whole family disease, and it really is.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. It was a difficult time, but I said to myself several times, why was I at this meeting that very day when, Dad was really encouraging me, you do this. He goes, I'm too shy to do stuff like that, but you do it. And he said, good luck. That was the last thing he said to me. Good luck with this meeting. That's just so great. He really encouraged me. And, after several months of sitting at home and being depressed, it wasn't even several months. He died in May, and in June, I was already speaking to patients to say we need to do something. And that started, I did step down, somebody else took over, but it did start up the Canadian Fabry Association at that time, which, it's really grown since then, obviously. And now that you're the executive director, I do believe families come together when something like this tragic happens in their lives, that they either want to be quiet about it or they want to give back. And I just felt it was something I needed to do. And so I started lobbying the government, both provincially and federally, for funding for other patients across Canada, along with several of the other members of our association.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you speak to patients and families and they are going through a time similar to what we went through, what do you find yourself saying to them most often?
Well, that's a good question, because I think when I was in their situation, there wasn't a lot of hope. There wasn't all these companies working on treatment today. And today there's so many companies working on treatment, gene therapy. There's so much positive to it today compared to years ago. So I think the one thing that I can give them is some reassurance and some hope that, you know, you don't have to worry as much as what we had to worry about. So I think that's my message to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I'm thinking for someone listening who's just there right now, who's just like finds this podcast and they're listening to it and they're like, okay, like what Donna said really helped me. And I'm thinking, as a little girl watching you, I didn't know at the time because you don't when you're a little girl, but you always just felt so steady and strong. But I know being in the stage of life that now how hard it felt inside. I'm trying to think of those people who, who maybe they have children and they think that maybe they're just so overwhelmed in it all. What can you tell them?
Well, I can think of one, two, or three couples that I've spoke to recently that are going through what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like once I tell them my story and what we went through, and the fact that there wasn't anybody working on this, there wasn't because there's a sense of panic that comes into your life. Like, what if,
True.
once this happens and you're panicky about the future and you feel like you don't have anything to look forward to. So I do try to calm them down. I try to tell them that education equals freedom. And the more you know, the more questions you can ask, the better you feel. And so, I mean, that took me a very long time to learn myself. And, do I wish I would have had a different journey in my life? Of course.
Yep.
But I also look back and say, like, what has it taught me?
Mm-hmm.
It's taught me so much about myself, about resilience. There's been so many angels that have flown into my life because of Fabry. So many people I feel like I'm blessed to be part of their lives as well. And I do feel a sense of giving back and accomplishment, helping these people with their journey as well. And I will see it through to the end. I give them my phone number. I tell them they can call me anytime. And I have had many patients call me. So that's what my message is.
I'm honored to work alongside you. And I think it's been a really interesting and cool experience to do this with, we share the same story. And I watch you when you're talking to patients and when you're standing up there giving a presentation and you're sharp and you're creative and you have all these, this experience has really shaped who you are, but you chose that, you chose to let it change you and shape you. And I think that is a really big lesson. I think when I look at the experience that you've had, I think that's a lesson for me, is to say, okay, so you went through all these hard things and you said, okay, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other every day and I'm going to continue to do it, even though it was really hard. And you let the experience change you in ways that I don't think that you thought you were going to be doing this. You're going to be, you have a big birthday coming up, and I don't think that you thought you'd be doing this at your big birthday. And I think, to me, that is the coolest thing. So I'm proud of you for that.
Well, I'm happy to be here for this big birthday, but yeah, I think it's important if you've got a message in this world that you share it and you try to give back to the world, because I think it keeps me going. It does play an emotional toll on you as well. I was getting emotional just talking about Dad's death here, and I'm thinking, it's something that never leaves you. There doesn't a day go by that I don't think about him and miss him, and so. But I think giving back and being a caregiver is a difficult thing. But I think as long as you've got a sense of community and you join a group and you feel supported, that's a good thing. And something I started listening to is Mel Robbins there is actual something called the caregiver syndrome. And I found out, I just wrote it over here, that April 7th
Okay.
is National Caregivers Day.
Oh, wow.
Which was just passed, which is something I didn't know. So that's something we're going to have to start to celebrate with our caregivers in the Fabry community in the future.
Absolutely.
April
7th. Okay. That's actually right after Fabry International Women's Day, which is the first Saturday of April every year. So now we know to lump these two together. That's important. I think that caregiver syndrome, what you just said, this comes with all sorts of different things. I think you touched on a few. Resentment, guilt, probably.
Yeah.
Sadness, fear, all these emotions. And I think it's so important because, we so often focus on the Fabry patient for good reason. But this person walking along the journey is their lives, their future, their pretty much their everyday, their planning, the trips they take, the ones they don't take, all the pivoting is something that's that person's life. Like, it's like we focus on this patient life, but that's that other person's life walking the journey right there with them. And I know at one of our meetings, at one of our patient empowerment meetings that we had in Canada, we all stood, we had the caregivers stand up and we clapped for them and we showed them like, this is so important to recognize. But beyond that, if they're not connected by the CFA or any sort of patient organization, I just think it's like just something that just deserves the space to say like, wow, it's so much, it's every day of your life that is impacted. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but I bet you probably have some thoughts.
Well, when we do these breakout sessions at some of our meetings, and the last one that was in BC, it really touched me because there was, a new patient. It was just like he was still in that fear, in the what if mode. After the meeting and after everybody talked and we all supported each other and hugged each other, he came up to me and he said, I just feel like a load has come off me. And I think, you go to the doctor, they can't provide you with that. So they can't provide you with that feeling of support because they're too busy. And we love our doctors across Canada. They're just great. And we're so lucky here. Our group, what it's become, means so much to the patients and to the community. And so, that makes me happy that I always said if I could change one person's life, they didn't go through what I went through, that would make me happy. So I do feel somewhat proud of what I've been able to do and help others.
Do you have any parting words, for anybody who is in this role?
For the Fabry patients and caregivers, I would say you don't have to worry quite as much as I did. We are all here to support you, and there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of people working on Fabry. We got this. We're going to accomplish a cure for Fabry. I feel it. Just reach out to us anytime. We are there for you.
Yeah. And I know I heard you say, be educated, choose that road. I think it is less heavy. It's a lot to learn, but it's less heavy. Get connected, really important. That means find your people, the ones that are going to be there and circle you and help you along the way. It's so overwhelming sometimes, but I think that the work that you put into it, I think it's going to have better days for you. And I've seen you model that. And I think that is really important. If you're listening and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get to the next day. I don't know how we're going to continue down this path. We know that as we age, it tends to get a little bit harder. So it's probably hard when you're in a stage where you already feel like you're overwhelmed. How do you keep going? How do you push through that? So maybe some of the things I heard you say are, just keep moving and keep doing it. And do you have anything to say to just that really hard moment? How do you get to the hard moment to the next hard moment? How do you do that?
Sheila and Rebecca, thank you for those words. Find your people, because we use it, and that's so true.
Yeah.
Have someone that supports you is important. Even if they don't have Fabry, you've got a neighbor, you've got a minister, a good friend. they'll support you because they care about you, and it's important to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for shaping how I understand strength. And I am so proud of you, Mom. I hope everyone listening that this is a reminder that even through your hardest moments, there is a way forward.